You are looking live at US Bank Stadium, the site of Super Bowl 52. The Eagles returning for the first time since they became Super Bowl champions. One of the greatest days in an Eagles fan's life. But it's a new day. They are taking on a different team, the Minnesota Vikings, today. It's going to be a hostile road environment like it always is. Welcome to the Kickoff Show presented by Axalta. Amy Campbell, Fran Duffy. Fran, we can get a little nostalgic, but the team is not going to go there. Malcolm Jenkins saying this week it is not a time to reminisce, but we can reminisce a little bit. How much of a factor is that today?
Yeah, of course, it's going to be a little bit of a factor, especially on that drive over for the guys earlier today. I'm sure some of those feelings for the players that were here, they start pouring back in, but as you mentioned, these are two different teams, two different coaching staffs, and obviously, look, the Eagles didn't play the Vikings last time they were here, so the Eagles have to be ready to lock in and be ready for this game. It's one of the big coaching points for the coaching staff going into this matchup. We'll see, if they were able to flush those feelings going into today. Yeah,
we have 3-2 teams, two NFC teams, and we know the Vikings beat the Eagles at home here in South Philadelphia last year. So, like you said, turning the page on this, it's going to be a great matchup between these two teams. What do you see the Eagles, where's the mentality of this team heading into this one?
I think to me right now, it's obviously the first winning streak of the season, right? They've won the last two games, and I think what's very interesting is that they won it in two different ways. You go back 2 weeks ago against Green Bay, that was an offensive-driven game. They dominated the line of scrimmage. The run game was big. The passing game was very efficient. 4 for 4 in the red zone, great on third down. Then you go to last week, the offense takes a little bit of a step back, but then you get the 10-sack performance from the defense. So you're able to win in lots of different ways. The best teams are able to do that. That's got to be the mindset going into what's really a very strenuous stretch here with starting with these 3 road games.
Yeah, 3 road games in a row, but as Coach Doug Peterson says, none more important than this one because this one is the next one. And when we look at this matchup on paper, it's one that I am the most excited that I have been so far this season because of the matchup and the makeup of both of these teams. Kind of the big numbers that are jumping out is this Eagles run defense against the Vikings run offense. Eagles the best run defense in the NFL statistically through the first 5 games, and the Vikings that number 3 rushing offense with Dalvin Cook, one of the best running backs in the country. I believe he's number 2 statistically so far this season in rushing yards. That's going to be the matchup to watch. How do you see that as a factor in this one?
Well, it's going to be huge, and I think really when you look at this run game for the Minnesota Vikings, really kind of sparks it into 2 different halves. Yeah, you've got the Dalvin Cook effect, right? And his game is all about speed. If he gets up to the second and third level, the defensive backs, the linebackers for the Eagles, you've got to be reliable as tacklers. You cannot hesitate. If you take a bad angle against Dalvin Cook, it is going to go to the crib. You cannot allow him to get out into open space. Then from a schematic standpoint, don't forget, Amy, that this defensive scheme with Jim Schwartz, when he was at Tennessee, was built on stopping the stretch run game with Edgerrin James and with the Indianapolis Colts, Peyton Manning, Howard Mudd, that whole crew. It was built to stop this scheme. So ultimately what you're going to see from this crew is that up front, you've got to set the edge. So Derek Barnett, Brandon Graham, change the line of scrimmage. Don't allow him to get outside. Force him to stop his feet in the backfield. And then you need everybody to do your job, stay in your respective gap, get the backside pursuit, build a triangle around Dalvin Cook or whoever is in the backfield as the ball carrier. That's how you prevent this run game from getting going.
Well, and I think Fletcher Cox said it best earlier this week. We need to get on him before he gets started talking about Dalvin Cook, make him make up his mind. And, of course, we know the run game gets going. That feeds the play-action game, which Kirk Cousins loves in his offense. Let's head back out to US Bank Stadium. The Eagles are warming up. Let's check them out as they get ready. There he is, QB1, number 11, Carson Wentz with those pink cleats.
Look at that.
Those are pretty fly.
Yeah, it looks really good. This could obviously going to be a big game for Carson Wentz. A mental test, a physical test, going up against a really aggressive, a fast, versatile, pressure-filled defensive front there with Mike Zimmer's defense. So a huge test for this Eagles offense and number 11, Carson Wentz.
Yeah, and of course we know the offense, they got the win over the Jets, but are looking to take a step forward, kind of clean things up against what's going to be a really tough defense there in Minnesota. When you look at some of the pass catchers, what kind of matchups are you seeing between the Eagles offense and here you go. This guy probably going to have a lot of attention today against a Minnesota Vikings defense. I think they're probably going to be, a couple of guys on Mr. Ertz here.
Yeah, I think really when you look at this Minnesota defense, they like to play in their sub package. So it would not surprise me at all if the Eagles stuck heavy with 12 personnel with 2 tight ends in this game. See if you can force Minnesota to play in their base defense, get that extra linebacker out in the field, and see if you can get Zach Ertz and Dallas Goedert more involved in the passing game, take advantage of some of those matchups in the deep and intermediate parts of the field. That would not shock me at all. So that would be something to keep an eye on this game. You see Nelson Aguilar there as well in the frame. To me, it takes advantage of some of those matchups on the outside as well, because I think with both those corners, Trey Raines and Xavier Rhodes, both big, physical, press corners, struggle a little bit with their speed, and I wonder if they're able to get Mac Hollins and Nelson Aguilar down the field in this game.
Well, and if you're counting at home the amount of 12 personnel references we have, you can add another one to your list. Let's talk about the run game. We know the Vikings are very aggressive up front. And, of course, the Eagles placed Corey Clement on injured reserve earlier this week. Boston Scott promoted from the practice squad. A guy that the Eagles staff has really liked a lot and talked about, you know, maybe this is like the next Darren Sproles that they're hoping to develop. A good stable of running backs here to face the Vikings.
What I love most about this running back crew, Amy, is that they might be the best pair
of
pass protectors in the NFL. I think when you look at both Jordan Howard and Miles Sanders, we all remember that big play that Carson Wentz made in the pocket where he ducked under a pass rusher and was able to deliver. He doesn't make that play without Jordan Howard getting a hand on the pass rusher. Miles Sanders laid out a corner on a corner blitz this past week. Watching both these guys in pass protection has been a lot of fun, and you're going to need that against this Minnesota defense because they love to send their linebackers, their safeties, their corners. Both of these guys are going to be a huge part in keeping Carson Wentz upright in this game.
Well, and you love to see that from your running backs because really that comes down to just effort, focus, determination. It's kind of one of those intangible things, and really the culture has set that. Let's take a look at the offensive starters here for the Eagles today. And, of course, we know Carson Wentz is going to be the face of the team here. What else stands out to you when you look at this list here today, Fran?
Well, let's talk about a group that we haven't spoken on yet, and that's the offensive line.
Oh, yeah.
They dominated the line of scrimmage 2 weeks ago against Green Bay, another NFC North team, another group that loves to be aggressive, play in sub-package, come at you from different angles. It's a very similar group here in Green Bay. They do it a little bit differently, but the same kind of philosophy. So the Eagles will need to try and establish themselves up front, whether it's with the run game or in pass protection. You need to give Carson Wentz time to hit guys like this out in the perimeter with Alshon Jeffrey.
Well, and you know, if you give Alshon the opportunity, he is going to make some things happen, the big plays over the top. And yes, continuing to talk about that offensive line, especially as they match up against the Vikings defense, I think it is going to be a really big test for them. When the Vikings look, we've talked about it all week, this Mike Zimmer front four. They've been there for a while. These teams know each other. They have their identity. This Vikings team is not a defense that's looking for its identity. And here we go. Another defense not looking for its identity. There's the main cornerstone up front himself, Fletcher Cox.
Yeah, I think when you look at this defense, it's built on the defensive line. Fletcher Cox, Brandon Graham, Derek Barnett, those guys getting after the run, getting after the quarterback. It's going to be pivotal in this game. You want to make Kirk Cousins and that Minnesota offense one-dimensional. Take the run away, force them to beat you on third and long situations. That's the situation you want to be in if you're the Eagles defense, and it's going to start really with those two guys right there.
Well, and we talked a lot this week about Dalvin Cook and the challenge that he's going to be for especially the defensive tackles in the front. But talking to these guys this week, Fletcher Cox, Brandon Graham, I mean, they are excited for this challenge. They love a challenge like this, and I just love to see that fire from them. They are ready for this.
Yeah, if you're the best at anything, you love to be able to take on the challenge of somebody who says they want to try and take that away from you. So if you're the best run defense in the NFL, you love taking on a run game that's been as prolific and has been as productive and effective as the one in Minnesota. So the Eagles are seeing this as a huge test, another benchmark to prove themselves as the best unit in the NFL.
Let's take a look at the defensive starters as well. And, of course, we were looking at Derek Barnett there. He's really come on in this year. We haven't talked about Malcolm Jenkins yet today, which is kind of a rare thing. What do you see the challenge for the secondary in this one? We talked a lot about the Vikings run game, but they've got a couple of nice receivers out there, too.
Yeah, you're going to talk about the run game, but the play-action game is so important with this team and with Kirk Cousins. The fifth most play-action passes coming into the week. The Eagles secondary has to be efficient, has to be disciplined on the back end in coverage.
All right, and let's talk about the linebackers. What do you think the challenge is going to be for those guys in the Eagles defense?
Well, anytime you deal about play action, it's all about keying and diagnosing early. So is it going to be run? Is it going to be pass? We got to get back to our landmarks, make sure we cover up the intermediate area of the field. The Vikings love to attack that area off play action.
All right, it should be a really good one. We've broken down a lot of the key matchups, and of course, we're going to get into our keys as well. But Right now, we're going to go back out there. We're going to check in with Eagles insider Dave Spadaro. Dave, we know the team has been talking this week. Hey, it's not a big storyline that we're going back to the scene of the Super Bowl win, but you got to be feeling a little bit of nostalgia standing on that same field for the first time since then.
Yeah, no doubt. Walking in here very early in the morning, looking around, finding where my seat was for the game, where the Philly special was, that end zone, the final play of the game, what end zone that was. I mean, it all floods back, and then it's gone, because this game is a totally different thing, and the players, a lot of them are different, and obviously the circumstances are different too, but it is very cool to be back at the site of the Eagles' greatest moment.
Well, putting all those feelings aside, Dave, now let's focus in on this matchup. What's one big storyline that everybody watching this game needs to be focused in on?
Well, I mean, the storyline here is this: win the line of scrimmage, okay? The Eagles think that they're going to stop the run. Every bit of the focus is, we are going to rally to the ball. We're going to stop Dalvin Cook. So then the next thing you want to do is make sure that Kirk Cousins doesn't play action you to death, because he loves to play action. So, Zach Brown did some talking this week, right? And the sense that I got today before the game, heard a comment, hey, we don't mind that. That's a good thing. Puts the pressure on Kirk Cousins. So you got to win the line of scrimmage. Defensively, the same thing. The Vikings pressure you off the edge with Everson Griffin, outstanding player. Danielle Hunter, outstanding player. Eagles, well-suited to match up there. And then they're going to run the football. So win the line of scrimmage. That is my storyline of the game.
It's going to be a strength on strength, different matchups across the board. For the Eagles, Dave, what is the key to this one for you?
Yeah, for me, it's getting after Kirk Cousins. In 2017, the Eagles sacked Cousins 4 times in both games. Each game, 4 sacks. They also took the football away 4 times. And they beat the Washington Redskins and Cousins in both of those games. Last year at Lincoln Financial Field, the Vikings came in and won one. Cousins had a big game. You want to get up in his face. You want to get after Kirk Cousins. You want to obstruct his line of vision. And you want to make him throw the ball to the Eagles, not the Vikings. To me, that's the key. If the Eagles do not pressure Kirk Cousins, very difficult matchup against Thielen and Diggs. Even with Sidney Jones back, I just think it's a really tough matchup. So the Eagles have to get after Kirk Cousins early, often, and be very physical with him.
Great analysis there, Dave. I also just want to point out there's a lot of really cute little cheerleaders behind you, so that's definitely fun to watch. We'll catch you after the game. Have a good one.
All right, thank you. Great game. Go Birds.
Yes, love it. I love seeing all those little girls out there. They're so cute. I was a little distracted because they're so cute. Great stuff there from Dave when we talk about the keys. I think there are so many keys to the to this one. Like this to me is just one of those matchup-rich games that we can really dissect a lot of different ways. What's the key for you in this one?
Well, we've talked a lot about stopping Dalvin Cook in this run game, but I think ultimately it's not just about the rushing attack. When you talk about Dalvin Cook and Alexander Madison and Amir Abdullah, it's also about the screen game. They're an excellent screen team. So with the Eagles, what is one of the big things that the screen game is very good against? Aggressive defensive lines and against the blitzing aspect of this Eagles defense. So that's something that Jim Schwartz and the Eagles defensive unit, they've got to be prepared for. The screen game, Dalvin Cook, all those running backs, the tight ends, the receivers, they're a very good screen team there in Minnesota. Keep an eye on those draw run plays as well. That's something they're also very effective at.
Yeah, and for me, the key, look, I'm going to flip it to the other side of the ball, and this is going to come down to the Eagles offensive line, protecting Carson Wentz and also establishing the run. This Vikings defensive front is aggressive. They are disruptive across the board when you talk about, these big name disruptive forces up front with Everson Griffin and Linval Joseph and Danielle Hunter just across the board. So for the offensive line to be able to, like I said, both phases of the offense, protecting the quarterback, number one, so that he has time to get to his guys down the field, and then establishing the run. A lot to watch there in the trenches, really on both sides, but I'm looking at the Eagles offensive line because it's one of the best in the country.
No question. I think when you talk about those group, you have to talk about the run game as well. It was huge for them. Really, you go back 2 weeks ago against Green Bay. In the past victories against Minnesota and this defensive front, the Eagles have been able to establish the run. It's going to be a big thing here in this game.
A lot to watch, a lot of keys to the game in this one. What about some players to watch? Well, we know Merrill Reese and Mike Quick have us covered from US Bank Stadium. Merrill, what you got for us?
Amy, we are back here at the site of the Eagles' greatest day, but today it's just Game 6 of the NFL season, but a very important Game 6 Mike, who is your player to watch?
I'm going to talk about a guy that we never focus in on the player to watch. It's a homecoming for Carson Wentz, number 11. I'm going to focus on Carson Wentz for a number of reasons, not just the homecoming, but the fact that Mike Zimmer's defense will throw so many things at him. They'll try to confuse him. He has to really be on point, understand what they're trying to do against him, and combat what they're trying to do against him. And you?
Well, you took that right out of my mouth, because I was going to say that Carson Wentz, because to make up for that fumble that he had back at the link last year, which was returned by Linval Joseph, 64 yards for a touchdown. So I will go with Nelson Aguilar. I've been going with Nelson Aguilar for a while, but one of these days he's going to take a bomb from Carson Wentz and hit pay dirt. Today could be that day. Back to you, Amy.
I love Merrill saying, I'm picking Nelson Aguilar. One of these days he's going to hit pay dirt. Look, I mean, that day could be today. It's a good matchup for him.
It is a good matchup. I mentioned that those corners on the outside. I think with that lack of speed we've seen from that group this year, you might see some vulnerability down the field.
But of course, I love what Mike said about, hey, it's a Carson Wentz homecoming. Not only just a homecoming for Carson Wentz, but Nate Gary talked about that. He'll be in the one-on-one with Mike Quick a little bit later. He'll get into that. But Dallas Goedert, also from that area. I'm sure a lot of these Eagles have family and friends that are going to be at this game. We are going to go ahead and take a quick break. Of course, I mentioned that Mike Quick interview coming up later. He's going one-on-one with Nate Gary. It's really good, so you don't want to miss that. That'll be a little bit later in the show. For now, if you're watching us on social media, head on over to the Eagles app. Head over to PhiladelphiaEagles.com. We will be exclusively there when we come back from this commercial, so we'll see you in a minute.